What's that sound? It's For Amusement Only, the EM and Bingo Pinball Podcast.
Welcome back to For Amusement Only. This is Nick Baldridge. Ava won't be joining us this time. Her schedule and mine have been absolutely insane, and she did not travel with me to the York show, which this show is all about. First off, I wanted to thank my good friend Sam, without whose help I just wouldn't have been able to make it to York this year, so really appreciate all of his time, expertise, and help with moving everything. Very, very much appreciated. Thank you, Sam. The York show, for those who haven't been, is one of my absolute favorite shows. There are so many different eras of pinball which are represented, and one of the best representations of that is in Wood Rail Row. So this was the inspiration for Bingo Row, but these beautiful wood rails are typically all lined up. And this year, with the passing of Wayne Nyans, there were many of his games lined up all in a row, just beautiful, ready for the public to play. Because of stuff going on, I usually don't have much opportunity to play mini games anymore at any given show, but this year I did take the time and played Lovely Lucy, which remains one of the top 5 games of all time for me. So many different ways to approach the game, so many different ways to win, and so many different ways to lose. That I prove over and over again. As well as Queen of Hearts. Queen of Hearts is an excellently designed game, another one that allows you to feel like you're almost doing something, but you never actually are. And I played several quick games of Queen of Hearts before the show opened one day, and managed to not quite complete 4 of a kind or 5 in a suit, but I came awfully close several times. Aside from Wood Rail Row, there's also the beautiful Bingo Row. Every year, myself and a group of like-minded collectors get together and try to bring out as many different examples of bingo pinball machines as we can. So as part of that this year, there was a United Caravan that was brought by Ed, Carnival Queen, which was brought by Len, and a Big Wheel, which was brought by Jim. And I want to thank all 3 of them and the entire Pittsburgh crew that helped Len and Ed with those machines throughout the show for all their kindness and generosity in bringing those games for the public to play. As part of Bingo Row, of course, the fabulous Multi-Bingo was available for play. This year I brought a 20-hole playfield with rollovers that came from a double-up, so that allowed for the playing of about 24 different games. And of those games, I'd say the most popular were Big Wheel, oddly enough. It was placed right beside Jim's Big Wheel, and I think people wanted to see them up against one another, see how accurate they were to each other. Bonus 7, and there were quite a few games played on London, I believe. As part of Bingo Row, of course, any 3, 4, or 5 in a row or section will win a prize, and this year, the prize that I had to give away was a vinyl postcard that I commissioned that included a medley of songs from the soundtrack of my next game, Drained, for the P3 pinball platform. And these are songs that were composed by Charles Wolfe Music, had a great collaboration with that composer throughout the development of the game, and I'm very much looking forward to showing you what that game is soon. But as a little teaser, I brought these vinyl postcards, and I think they're really cool. So if you're familiar with flexi discs, it's kind of that principle, but with a rigid backing. So they will hopefully be easier to play and will not wear as quickly as those flexi discs. Though it was busy, and though there were fewer of us collectors that were around to be able to give tutorials and point out when there were 4 and 5 in a row winners, I was able to give away a large number of these limited postcards, but I do still have a handful left, so if you would like one, they won't be remade, and I'll be happy to send one to you. Just send me your name and postal address, and I'll get one in the mail to you at foramusementonlypodcast@gmail.com, and I'll put that in the show notes as well. So I brought the 20-hole playfield because I had a player last show who came up to me and asked for me to bring that as something different. And I had brought the 20-hole playfield separately, as well as a 28-hole playfield a few years ago, but I determined it was too difficult to swap the bingo playfields during a show. They require access to both the front and the back of the machine, and it's just a lot to ask during a show. It's quite different from swapping a P3 module, as we'll talk about later, where it's a little easier in a show setting. So I brought this for this specific player, and he came out and just played the heck out of the game, and so I'm very glad that he was able to experience that. And at the end, he came up and asked me to bring the 25-hole next year, so that's what I will do. I always set up right at the end of Bingo Row because my games kind of straddle the line between original and modern, and so the multi-bingo was kind of the demarcation point for the rest of my games. Beyond that, I also brought multi-races, and this is the one-ball horse race multi-game, all on one playfield. There's 39 different games to choose from, and this was the first year that I brought it with that many games, and the beautiful backglass by Joel de Guzman. Just amazing work, and got lots of compliments on that backglass artwork and how well integrated it was to the entire package. So my compliments as always, and again to Joel de Guzman for such a great job. On multi-races, the different games can either pay out directly or they pay out in replays like the bingos do. So a couple years ago, I commissioned Ryan Clater to design a token that could be paid out on the payout games, and it's no cash value, not legal tender, of course. A little plastic token with a unique design, and they came out beautifully. And this year I brought more of those and gave those away to people who won on multi-races. By far the most popular games on multi-races, especially for new players walking up to it, were the simpler ones. It's like stepping back in time when you walk up to a one-ball horse race game to play, because they're so very different from modern games. They require a very different skill set. You're putting in a nickel, raising your ball, and then either putting in additional nickels or taking your single shot and hoping that you can guide the ball to the appropriate hole on the playfield to win. Later games were designed by Don Hooker, and that was the primary designer of the Bally Bingos, and so they are far more complex and introduce concepts that were utilized in the bingos themselves. Some players take to those, and some players don't. So typically, for a new player, especially one who has no idea what this game is, I try to start them on some of the simpler ones. So the third game that I brought was the Multimorphic P3. So this is a pinball platform. It's again a modular game with multiple games that can be played in one cabinet. And I brought 4 different playfield modules. So these modules are about 2 foot square and can be dropped into the back portion of the P3's playfield and completely change both the targets and the experience that the player has, as well as the games which are available for them to play. The 4 playfields that I brought were Lexi Lightspeed Escape from Earth, on which I developed a game called Quest for Glory, Cosmic Kart Racing, on which I developed Ranger in the Ruins, Heist, on which I co-developed along with Sophia Baldridge, my daughter, Silver Falls, and Cannon Lagoon, on which I developed Flipper Foxtrot Rhythm Explosion. So Quest for Glory is an extremely complicated game. This was the first show that this one appeared at, and there are, just to give you an idea, 3 different character classes to choose from, the ability to save and restore your state, over 700 different modes, dozens and dozens of voice actors, thousands and thousands of lines of dialogue, and a huge sweeping scenario for a pinball game especially, that proved to be very challenging for players in a show environment. So typically at a show, the public is walking from game to game and just playing everything that they can as quickly as they can because they want to get to the next game. So a game that requires you to stop and think requires, well, some might say it's very similar to the bingos in that you have to actually pre-plan everything that's going on. One player had a suggestion to pause the game at any given point. The game is fairly forgiving with how it returns a ball to the player and how frequently it does so. So I'm not sure. The game is designed not to operate in the fashion that player requested, and I'm not sure if that's something that I want to add or not. Taken under advisement, though. I also brought Ranger in the Ruins. Ranger in the Ruins is an endless runner score attack roguelike game. So the roguelike element is that each player can earn different items from previous players' ghosts. So each player that plays, when they die, the last item that they hold will be available for another player to find later on. If you're connected to the internet, that pulls from a pool of different ghosts that come from all over the world. And it's proved to be a very popular game, and it's very popular at shows as well. Part of that is probably because I had it on one ball, which is the factory setting. So the games are very quick, and you can see just a glimpse of what the game has to offer, and it encourages you to play over and over again. And that's what I saw over and over again, which is really heartening. So it was very cool. There was a lot of crossover appeal through different demographics for Ranger in the Ruins, which I found very, very neat. Next up was Silver Falls. Silver Falls is on the Heist playfield, and again, that was co-developed with my daughter Sophia. She helped me design the game, and I did all the development. So co-designed is a better word. In Silver Falls, you're creating a character, earning money by hitting specific shots on the playfield, and then using that money in a store to furnish a given room. As you completely furnish a room, a hurry-up mode starts. Complete the hurry-up mode, and you're able to move to the next room. This proved to be the most popular P3 game that I produced, and people enjoyed the Scott Danesi soundtrack, which is very unique and just absolutely unlike anything else in pinball. Next up is Flipper Foxtrot Rhythm Explosion, which is on the Cannon Lagoon playfield. Flipper Foxtrot Rhythm Explosion is a rhythm pinball game. You're utilizing the different buttons on the P3 in order to match notes which progress up the screen. If you miss a note, a pinball pops out, and you're required to return that. Your overall goal is to survive through the entire song. There's a health bar to indicate if you're going to survive or not. It was really cool to see different people playing different games, and one of the coolest things was that I brought different aids to help with swapping the different games throughout the show. Since I only had one physical P3, but I had 4 different games that I wanted to show people, I wanted people to understand at a glance that there were more games that were coming, and if they came back around, there would be another game for them to play. And so I built this monitor setup that showed the back glass of the next game that was going to be playable, as well as a countdown timer, and a ton of, moving and dancing and shimmering imagery to entice the eye. So once the player finished playing, inevitably they would look at this monitor and they would say, "Oh, another game, huh?" So that would either spark a conversation, or later on I was seeing people set alarms or just make notes to come back through, and it was really cool because people did. So it really worked. And the time interval on the swaps, I would have each game playable for an hour and a half, and then I would swap it. I never took a break, so I was there either giving tutorials on the different bingos, or swapping the games, or talking to people about development, talking to people about problems with machines that they had that they were trying to fix, EM or bingo, talking about game development, homebrew development, all kinds of different aspects of the hobby in which I've participated, and it was just a blast. Every year, York is so much fun, and I really enjoyed my time there and absolutely loved talking to everybody at the show. Old friends, new friends, tech friends, homebrew friends, thank you all for making this year's York show so much fun, and I can't wait to do it all over again. Very soon, I should be announcing the release of my new game, so please keep an eye out for that. And if you would like to hear more about some other unique and interesting devices with which I interact. I've been co-hosting a podcast with Don and Ryan called Hello Playdate, and this podcast is all about the Panic Playdate handheld console. So please give that a listen, and all of this will be in the show notes. So I'll put a link to my company's website, the Hello Playdate podcast, and of course instructions on how to request one of those drained vinyl postcards. So that's all for tonight. Thanks very much for listening. My name again is Nick Baldridge, and you can reach me at foramusementonlypodcast@gmail.com. You can also call For Amusement Only Games on the former Bingo's line. That's 724-BINGOS1, 724-246-4671. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you next time.